Hey, everybody, I'm very excited. Welcome to another episode of We Move Forward Together. And what's so special about today's episode, we're going to meet a lady who's the archivist for the Dominican Sisters of Amityville. And if you ever get to go to the Mother House, you have to check out their archive room. It really is a living history of how the Dominican Sisters from Germany came over to Brooklyn and then expanded out to Long Island. But I want to welcome Sister Margaret Kavanaugh to We Move Forward Together. Welcome, sister. So good to have you here.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Yeah. So when I first got introduced to the Dominican Sisters, or reintroduced, I should say, what I loved about walking the halls was seeing all the great pictures and highlighting different stories. Mm-hmm. And they said, well, if you see that, you got to check out this room, which really goes through the history. But do me a favor, sister, tell me, and I think it's a fantastic story with some missteps, I believe, about how the Dominican order came to the United States and in particular Long Island.
Hey, well, the Dominican Sisters of Amityville came to the U.S. in 1853.
Wow.
They were from the monastery, Holy Cross Monastery in Regensburg, Germany, formerly called Ratisbon, now Regensburg. There were 4 sisters who came. They came at the behest of Dom Abbot Wimmer, who was a monk in Latrobe, Pennsylvania. They were supposed to go to Pennsylvania to teach the immigrant children, German immigrant children. There's a story there. We've often heard they were stranded at the dock. They were, but it wasn't Wimmer's fault.
Okay.
We've often heard that Wimmer just didn't show up. Not so. He had asked a confrere from New Jersey, Father Nicholas Bellice, I believe his name was, to come, and he didn't show. So they were stranded. They spoke no English, but they did have a letter of introduction. And so somehow, and we don't really know how, they got to the Redemptorist Church on the Lower East Side.
Okay.
And at the Redemptorist Church, they were put in contact with Father Refiner, the pastor of Most Holy Trinity in Brooklyn. Somehow there was a connection there, and I don't really know what the connection was. He was not a Redemptorist, I know that. And so a few days later, they wound up in Brooklyn, Williamsburg, Brooklyn. And initially, they lived in the rectory basement, which was damp, cold, poorly furnished. In a couple of months, they moved to the church basement, which wasn't really much better. However, they immediately took charge of the school, which had 140 students. And 2 of the sisters, Josepha Witzelhofer, who is our foundress, and Augustina Neuro, who accompanied her, taught 70 children each. And at the end of the first year there, they had 300 children. Within 2 years, they bought a small house. Bishop McDonald was the Bishop of Brooklyn, and he loaned them the money to buy this little house. And the records that I have say that it cost about $5,000, which really amazes me because you could buy a house in Levittown for $6,000 after World War II.
Right.
So that may not be accurate, but that's what we have. And then in another couple of years, they built a 4-story convent in Williamsburg, which still exists.
Okay.
There are no sisters there. It was at some point in the 1980s, I believe, taken over by Catholic Charities, and it became a single-room occupancy for formerly homeless people. It's now the Farrell housing, I think, still under Catholic Charities, and it's been converted into small apartments for low-income, unhoused people, if you will. So the tradition goes on. I mean, it's an amazing tradition because we took care of over 20,000 orphans. They weren't all orphans. Many of them were children whose parents could not care for them, primarily German children. Times were hard. They didn't have the funds to take care of the families. The children came into care. So between about 1855 and 1942, we cared for almost 20,000 children in various places. In the beginning, as the convents grew, each convent had to have rooms for orphans. So it might be 3 or 4 or 7 or 8, depending upon the size. We eventually built Nazareth Trade School in Farmingdale. That was for boys. And they were trained in various trades, bookbinding, carpentry, shoemaking, all kinds of things. Until I would say maybe 10 or 15 years ago, some of those former boys at Nazareth kept in touch with the congregation. My guess is most of them have gone to God at this point.
Right.
We also built St. Rose in Melville. That was for the girls.
Okay.
They were trained for domestic work. I have no records of them keeping in touch with the congregation. But later there was St. Dominic's home in New Hyde Park, Holy Spirit, at that time, Holy Ghost.
Okay. Yeah.
They had a building there. And the girls from St. Dominic's, I think it was a more homey atmosphere. I'm really not sure. But many of them did keep in touch. And we have a lot of artifacts from the needlework that they did. We have letters that they wrote. So very
nice.
interesting history. So this all happened within a few years of our foundation. So it was quite a start.
It's amazing. What jumped out at me is, a couple of things is the seeds of actually what we're planting here on the We Move Forward podcast is what we're trying to do for those who are listening and watching is we're trying to plant the seeds by showing examples and stories of what's been done. And it's really amazing. I mean, I'm thinking about the odds of these two ladies coming into a foreign land, not speaking the language.
Correctly. Actually, there were four.
Okay. And then building this and serving so many people. And, you could see the providence of God in people who must have stepped up and assisted with them, but, beyond the being stuck in a basement,
Right. They were. They lived in, you can imagine what a church basement was like in those days, horrible.
Yeah.
Actually, one of the original sisters died of TB 2 years after she came.
Wow.
A little less than 2 years. So, the situation was really horrible, but they forged on.
When I think about immigration today, because I think you've worked with that and the needs that are there, the people that are frightened and hiding, considering what's happening and how we can help them. That's in my heart and my mind these days. And I think about, a parent that has a child that now hands it over to the church and says, help. I can imagine, right? But knowing that they would be in good care and supported is another act of faith, right?
True. And in many cases, we have the records of about 18,000 of those children.
Okay.
And many of them were returned home when the parents were able to settle and manage to care for them. So many of them did go home at some point. Not all of them, but many did.
Wow. Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing
It
story.
is.
So I just want to speak to the audience for a moment, and I'd love anyone who's listening, if you've had an interaction with the Dominican and you've received really the support of these ladies that work, I'll say at ground level. Really, the strength of the church is our vowed and religious who've built up this country, really, and built up the immigrant and the people and those who are forgotten many times. Yeah. And Sister, I have to thank you for that. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that you have in 2023, was it? You celebrated your 60 years of service.
I did, yes.
That's great. That's really wonderful. All right. So how did they go from Brooklyn to become the Dominican Sisters of Amityville? How did that all happen?
Well, that happened really, I guess, over time as they started schools, mainly schools and hospitals. I'll talk about the hospitals in a minute.
Sure.
They went basically out the South Shore. We've never had, to my knowledge, a foundation on the North Shore of Long Island. So primarily Brooklyn in the beginning, then into Queens. Now, my understanding is that some of the German immigrants moved out to what they called Winfield, which is now Woodside, part of Woodside in Queens, to St. Mary's Parish. That was an early foundation. And again, it was very German. They moved to Elmont. Some of the better off had farms out in what was called Foster's Meadow, and that took in Elmont and right into, I believe, almost into Belrose, before we had all these boundaries.
Sure.
And So they went out to the island that way. Well, they were on the island. I mean, Brooklyn is part of Long Island, so we have to remember that.
Right, right.
Yeah, that's really important. Brooklyn, Queens, Nassau, Suffolk. I keep reminding people of that. So as the foundations went on, they were mainly in Brooklyn and some in Queens, and then it grew and it grew and it grew. And in some years, I don't have actual dates. They
Mhm.
moved out, basically out the South Shore of Long Island. But it was in 1876 that we went to Amityville. And that's a great story, I think. Mother Seraphina Steimer was our second prioress. Our original prioress, our foundress, Mother Josepha, died in 1864.
Okay.
And Seraphina was appointed by the bishop. They didn't have elections at that time. She was appointed by the bishop, and she had made so many foundations. I had a list of them someplace here. I can't even count them, probably about 15. But in 1876, Adam Schlegel, who was a contractor and a builder, I believe, gave a certain amount of property in Amityville for the care of the orphans and the care of the poor elderly. Consolation Home, which is now in West Islip, was part of that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Queen of the Rosary Academy, which closed in 1986, that eventually became part of it, a school originally for orphans, but very quickly they took in neighborhood children. So it grew that way. So going to Amityville in 1876, the group of 4 sisters and I think 2 postulants lived in what we call Seraphina Cottage. And if anyone comes to our
Oh, yeah.
ground, they'll see the cottage. And they built Rosary Hall, what we now call Rosary Hall,
Mhm.
which it wasn't the Mother House. The Mother House stayed in Brooklyn until
Okay.
1952. They built Rosary Hall, and they built Queen of the Rosary Academy, which of course expanded as the years went on. So the first 3 wings of Rosary Hall were built in 1876. The chapel wing, the 4th wing, which enclosed it,
Okay.
was built in 1878. They bought 11 acres of land. They bought then to add to what they had. For the total cost of the land and the building was $140,000.
Wow.
Picture that. It's a magnificent building. Magnificent. Still in full swing today.
Yeah, it's absolutely so. Just a side note, my 3 sisters went to QRA.
Oh, did they? Good.
Yeah, I have great memories of going to see The Sound of Music by a
Yeah.
full female cast. I recall the white and gold sports day, I think, where they would
Probably, yeah.
divide the school up and do that.
Mm-hmm.
And I tell you, the ground, the buildings are absolutely in pristine condition.
They are, yeah.
You can see them as you come into 555 Albany Avenue.
Mm-hmm.
You'll see a more modern building with a modern chapel and the
That
stained
was
glass.
1964, that
The
building,
stained
yeah.
glass just
Mhm.
facing the east, as many chapels and churches do.
Yeah.
And then you go back in time as you go more east in the building.
Mm-hmm.
And I got the tour by Sister Peggy Mivetti, your current prioress, and
Mhm.
it's awe-inspiring. And then
It is.
the fact that you have a farm there and such beautiful grounds, and all the sisters are cared for. And then next door, you have what used to be called Dominican Village. I don't think they
It
call it.
still is Dominican
Is it?
Village.
Yeah.
Officially Dominican Village, yeah. I think they have a sign that says the villas at Dominican Village. That Dominican Village was opened, and I'm going to say in the late 80s, maybe. I'm not absolutely certain of that.
Okay.
That's a separate corporation,
Sure.
but the land is ours. So they have, I believe, a 99-year lease on the land. So the land is still Sisters of St. Dominic, and it's a
Got you.
sponsored ministry.
You also had property out in a Watermill, is that correct?
We did, yes, which was sold probably around 2000, around there. I'm not sure of the exact date. Yeah, that was a wonderful spot. Originally, that property was bought hoping that it would be the college that they dreamed of founding, but realized rather quickly that it was too far east
I
to
see.
attract students because a lot of people didn't drive.
Right.
An 18-year-old probably didn't have a car back then. So later on, it came to Molloy College in Rockville Center, Molloy University.
What I'm also hearing which really kind of ties into where the congregation is right now. It's evolving, right?
Oh.
And one of so I have to mention the 4 energy centers that are ecology,
Mhm.
community, spirituality, and social justice. And we'll get into that a bit.
Mhm.
But what we're trying to accomplish with this podcast is, one, to show you where so many amazing things have happened over the years, and how can we pass on these good works to all people of goodwill,
Mhm.
men,
Mhm.
women.
Mhm.
You don't have to be in the vowed life, but
No.
that's okay too. But it's so interesting when you hear these stories, and I'll testify right here, is it blows me away. It blows me away of the potential obstacles. And you talked about, was it the second prioress that had all these foundations?
Mhm.
And being a layman, I'm thinking, wow, she must have been some saleswoman.
She was an amazing woman. She really was. Everything I have read about her, and I just did a presentation yesterday for a group of our associate candidates, they found it amazing as well. You know what was accomplished so early on in the congregation, and of course has been accomplished with each prioress in her own way, and her leadership team. It's ongoing and ongoing and ongoing. And you talk about social justice. And that term didn't exist back in 1853, but
Right.
that's exactly what the sisters were doing.
Hmm.
They were working what we now call social justice, caring for those who needed care, being part of the lives of people who were struggling to welcome themselves and be welcomed here in the United States of America. Not always accepted. You can't see it now, but in the Heritage Center, we have the original door from the 157 Montrose Avenue, where the large building was. And it's got all kinds of knocks on it. And I've been told that those were the know-nothings who came and tried to bang down the door. Now it's about 2 inches thick, so
Right.
they didn't manage. But those marks are there. So the people in that area suffered greatly, just as our immigrant community is suffering today. You know, and we have so many sisters working in the social justice area and being present to those people, and especially today, our immigrant communities. Very definitely.
You know, sister, you bring up a good point. And I've been to a number of protests along with my
Hmm.
wife. Yeah, what do you do it for? It's not going to make a difference. Guess what? We all have a voice,
It does make a difference.
and it does make a difference. You're right. And I can tell you how many times I look over my shoulder and I'm like, yep, Sister St. Dominic, Sister St. Dominic, Sister St. Dominic. There is.
Sisters of St. Joseph, there's a lot.
So yeah, the Joseph, a couple of those showed up. Yeah. And, I went to the Singing Resistance, which is another great movement as well. But if I can get into the mind of those who are listening, it's like, what can I do? You can get in touch with us. Leave a comment. We'll respond to every comment. And if you say, hey, you know what? I don't know what to do, but I want to do something, we'll connect you with the right people and put you to good work and good trouble as they
Good trouble, yes.
good trouble, which is a great line. But there's so many things to do. There are so many stories. Tell me about your activity in social justice. I'm curious.
Oh my goodness. Well, it goes way back. Goes way back. I mean, I can recall, I think in 1980s, leafleting on 2nd Street opposite Grand Central Station.
Okay.
And I honestly, it was something to do with nuclear arms. There was some building there, and I don't remember the building. But I do know my good friend, Sister Janetta, who died last summer, her
Sorry.
brother was on the board of MTA. And he came out of a meeting and called her that night. And he said to her, I want you to know that the FBI has your name now. He said, you're watched, everything you do, but you do it. You do
Right.
it. I mean, I lived in East New York for many, many years, and it was
Wow.
probably the most wonderful, wonderful place to live. The people, almost all immigrants, just wonderful people
Well,
to work.
let me stop you, sister. Because when I hear East New York, I'm like, oh, that's a rough neighborhood.
It was.
Okay.
Oh, it was.
But with
We
wonderful
loved it.
but with wonderful people there, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. I lived there for 25 years. And
Wow.
I mean, I didn't always minister there. I did in the beginning, but just wonderful, wonderful people.
Nice. So I want to talk about you for a little bit.
Me.
And we'll get, yeah, we're gonna do a little, we do a little inquisition. Okay. That's a dangerous,
Okay.
dangerous topic. Um, tell me about your connection and, I think you worked in communications at Molloy, now Molloy University. Tell me about
Mhm.
that.
Well, I went to teach at Molloy in 1983, and I was in the communications department. My main thing was public speaking, voice and diction. For many, many years, taught clinical phonetics for the students who were in speech pathology. And then later, about 12 years before I retired, I was sort of in administration. I was an associate with the academic affairs office. So that was a change, but I still taught. That was a big thing. I still taught a course each semester.
Wow.
So, yeah,
Now you're making me nervous.
I was there for 32 years and loved every minute of it.
Man, communication is the key to so many things.
It is.
Circling back to the prioress who must have been a great saleswoman, to communicate and get your point across and tell stories and plant these seeds, right? Plant these seeds
Right.
of someone saying, wow, what a great life. I want that. And I can't help but talk about, and I'm going to invite people, you got to get involved with the Dominican Sisters of Amityville. There is a palpable joy when you meet the sisters. It's just, the spirit's there. I can't
Mhm.
explain it. I can only say I experience it. And it makes me happy to, pop in every once in a while and just chat with people. It's just, you have a great community. And
That's great. Well, our motto says joy and hope. Dominican Sisters of Joy and Hope. And it goes on after that.
and
So hopefully
Veritas.
we show that joy
And
and the hope.
Veritas, right? Truth.
Oh, Veritas. Yes. Yes, absolutely.
All right. So how'd you get roped into being an archivist? Did nobody else volunteer and there you were?
Well, I am not a trained archivist.
Archivist. I knew I'd mispronounced it.
When I retired from Molloy, Pat Hanby, who was my canonical superior at the time, said to me, well, what do you plan to do? So I said, I have no idea, but I would love to work with the Heritage Center, the archive. She said, great, because Sister Marielle Erica, on whose shoulders I stand, was really retiring at the time. So that's how I came into it. And it's been several years of learning, and finding things and studying the history more deeply. I really became very involved in the history of the congregation through Sister Frances Maureen, who was
Okay.
our prioress way back in 1967 to 73. But I got to know her really well, and it was through her that I became deeply interested in history. I was not interested in it in school. In school, it seemed to me it was just dates you had to memorize. It really didn't come alive. So Frances really was the one who inspired me, if you will, to do that. And I keep her picture on my desk every day, sort of as a reminder that hopefully I am carrying on what I would never equal myself to her, but because she was a historian, she was brilliant. But my love for the history of the order and the congregation has just grown and grown and grown. And as I said to the women I met with yesterday, each time I do it, I find something new. I find something I didn't find before. And I was reflecting yesterday on the Emmaus story. And because I was going to be doing the presentation for the women, it struck me that when Jesus met them, he took them into the past, he brought them to the present, and he left them to go into the future. And that's what history does. If you know your past, you can work with your present and move into the future. That's my belief.
Nice.
I think it's critical to know the history, and for us, the history of the congregation, the history of the order, is very important. And I absolutely love it, I have to say.
Yeah, because when you can look on the foundation of how things were built, how things came about, there's a lot to be said about that. And I've sat through several meetings, in the We Move Forward Together team. And one thing I came away, I was like, boy, you ladies know how to run a meeting, and I mean that with love, for sure. Very, very well organized. Like we've been there, done that. Now you had mentioned associates, and that might
Mhm.
that was a real new word to me. What the heck's a Dominican associate? And, what's the rigor, or what's the qualification? Or I've spoken to a couple of associates and they say, hey, you know what? We follow the Dominican way. And I'm not probably saying that properly, but
No, that's true.
enlighten me a little bit on associates.
Well, the associates came to be mainly during Sister Irene Garvey's term. They were called co-members, and then the word associates came up, and that's a really closer bond. They are women and men who probably, I think in every case, have met the sisters in some way, and so come to us. They go through 2 years of formation, then they're bonded with the congregation. And they come to all of our meetings. They're involved in ministry. They're involved in a range of things. Every associate joins a local community for prayer once a month. So there's that constant, hopefully constant involvement that way. They're around here all the time. They're absolutely wonderful. And it's my belief that as we die out, and we will, they are there. They're committed. There's a group of associates in Tacoma, Washington. The Tacoma Dominicans have come to closure. The associates are still alive.
Oh, I see. Wow.
So they're carrying the charism, the mission in their own ways, whether it's in their parishes, in their ministries, in their workplace, they're carrying that forward. And I think it's a critical piece of our life. I believe that. I worked with the associates on the core committee for 6 years, and it was 6 wonderful years working with them. I've met many, many people and still meet them. I mean, I meet them all the time here, and they are just great. They're closely associated with us. Hard to explain. They're not vowed members, but they're
Right.
bonded.
Bonded. Yeah.
Yeah, bonded.
So, what's interesting? We've touched on social justice.
Mm-hmm.
We've talked about community really through the associates. And you know what? This is just a gut feeling. There is that, especially going through COVID, and I'm thinking about those a lot younger than me that were cheated out of community building by not being able to go to school and stuff like that. And they suffer from certain things as an impact of that, whether it's being social or knowing how to socialize or being a community.
Yes.
So again, I look to the audience and say, hey, if that's a thirst, right? If that's a thirst that you have, maybe the Dominicans, you got to meet a Dominican Sister of Amityville. That's a prerequisite. And, I talked about the joy, which is true. The charism, which is a churchy word, can be a charism but what's the stuff? What's the stuff that's behind the joy, right? Prayer life. We talk about spirituality. That can have like a negative term in church terms, like, oh, it's just a shallow way of looking at it. But there are a lot of people that I meet that say, hey, I'm not religious, but I'm spiritual.
And they are.
And they are. And it's like, okay, who can I be in company with to further explore that? And just like the story, the road to Emmaus, you need to walk with somebody on it. You can't do it alone. And the last of the energy centers is ecology. And what I've learned over the past few months is really the appreciation for God's great world that we're planted in, down to the smallest bug or the most beautiful flower. Sister, tell me about your work and the gospel of nonviolence, if that makes sense.
I would talk about our work. I think everything we do in ministry, in our community lives, speaks to the gospel of nonviolence. Excuse me. If nonviolent people, who are we as preachers of the word, which is what Dominicans are supposed to be, preachers of the word of God, the OP after our name, Order of Preachers. And preaching is not necessarily pulpit preaching. It can be, and here we're blessed to have a very excellent, excellent chaplain whose preaching is just outstanding. But preaching by the way we live, by the way we treat others, preaching by being aware of what's going on in the world, having conversations about it. What can we do? Who can we call? Our representatives. How can we make our voices heard through writing through direct communication. Phone calls are useless. You're not going to get them. But signing petitions. But I think most importantly is living a nonviolent life, not giving in to what is so prevalent in our world today, what is so prevalent, the wars that are going on, not just in Iran. I mean, we're forgetting about Africa.
Sudan, yeah.
I think to be aware of what's happening, and I think to bring it all to prayer is absolutely critical. I took a preaching workshop many, many years ago out in River Forest at Dominican University there. Sister Joan Delaplane, I believe an Adrian Dominican, one of the things she said is when you prepare a homily, you should have the New York Times in one hand and the Gospels in the other, and I've thought of that. I mean, I don't give homilies, but I've thought of that throughout the years since then, to be aware of what's happening in the world, to be aware and to look at both sides,
Right.
to really make some decisions and then to live according to that. The gospel preaches peace. We know that. Peace be with you. Peace be with you. Peace be with you. And to live that way, it's not easy. It's not easy. We live in a world of discord. We know that. Somewhat frightening. But if we have the gospel mindset, I believe we will live a nonviolent life. We will not be part of this huge discord that's going on, but we will be aware and we will live out that awareness, if that makes sense to you.
Yeah, it does. And what I'm just thinking about how the media is complicit in separating red versus blue, right?
Absolutely.
You hurt me, I'm going to hurt you.
Mm-hmm.
And not only physically, but in my discourse with you.
That's right.
And that's unfortunately instinctual. So you're fighting against your instincts. Like, how are you going to change the world? Well, it starts with yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that instinct to say, that passive aggressive comment. And, and I've learned this just recently about prayer. One of the sisters told me about this is, just sitting quiet. That's prayer.
Absolutely.
And asking for the Lord's influence, what I call the divine source of love, right? To help direct my path and get that bit of solace, which is a struggle. I'll to be honest with you, I'm on the screen a lot, and then I get the little report from my iPhone that says, you spend 4 hours a day on this screen. And I'm like, wow, that's not good. But you bring up a good point, and why I love the Dominicans is that you're examples of this. One, you've got true joy. I mentioned that before. But now, if you're listening to this, the next question is, how do I get that joy? How do I get that peace? How do I get that ability to, what was it? Lord, put your arm around my shoulder and your hand over my mouth, which is a prayer I should say a lot more often, according to a lot of people who know me. But it's so many great lessons. By the way, also, if you like what you've heard, please subscribe and help us spread the word of all these great stories. And sister, I really want to thank you. We can account for what's in our bank or what we own. We can never account for the time we have. And the fact that you've given me much of your time today and present to each other, what a blessing it is for me and for the audience that'll be listening to this.
Thank you very much.
All right. I look forward. Now I'm going to have eyes wide open. I'm going to find you when I get to the mother house and go.
I'm in this room.
I need the tour. I walked around myself and I just saw so many fantastic things. But again, thank you for being here. God bless. And
thank you.
We'll see everybody in the next time, and check out this video. We'll plug something in there for you to continue watching. Be well, everyone. Bye-bye now.